Welcome to Shadows at Dusk. Dusk is not the end. It's the doorway between two worlds. A place where stories slip through, quiet, cold, and true. You've entered that space now, and what follows is meant for you. Stay in the shadow. 12 solemn notes tolled from the venerable regulator clock in the foyer, each bronze chime dissolving into the profound quietude of the house. Ilara surfaced violently from sleep, heart hammering against her ribs, the residue of some unremembered nightmare clinging like damp silk. A disorienting moment passed before awareness returned. The Ashworth residence, this sprawling Victorian labyrinth, her temporary ward for a promised sum that now felt entirely inadequate. 3 days ensconced within its walls, and a persistent dissonance hummed beneath the surface tranquility. Perhaps it was merely the architecture's venerable size, the timber groaning its ancient complaints, or the wind's mournful aria through the eaves during the recent squalls. Yet moments existed, slivers of time, when phantom footfalls seemed to echo in vacant chambers, when peripheral flickers defied logical explanation. Shaking loose the last cobwebs of slumber, she swung her legs out, the chill of the polished floorboards a stark contrast to the bed's warmth. Barefoot, she padded towards the adjoining bath, the porcelain basin cool beneath her questing fingers. Water splashed against her face, a ritual ablution against the dream's lingering unease. As her hand reached for a linen towel, a soft, definitive thumps resonated from somewhere deep within the house's bowels, arresting her movement. She held her breath, ears straining against the silence that followed, thick and expectant. Then again, a muffled impact, heavier this time, the sound of something solid meeting the floor. Is someone there? Her voice, a thin thread in the vast tapestry of darkness, elicited no reply. Solitude was the agreement, the expectation, or so she had believed. Emerging from the bathroom, Ilara scanned the shadowed expanse of the guest suite. Nothing overtly disturbed, yet the moonlight carving geometries through the tall windows seemed to pool in deeper, more menacing configurations than before. Another thud, louder, undeniably originating from the ground floor, sent a frantic pulse drumming in her throat. Call for help? The thought flickered, but the absurdity of reporting ambiguous noises in a famously creaky manse held her back. Instead, an unnerving curiosity, morbid and potent, propelled her towards the bedroom door. The corridor beyond was an abyss, the darkness so absolute it felt tactile. Fumbling for her phone, she ignited its screen, the pale luminescence a fragile shield against the encroaching void, as she drifted towards the grand staircase. The regulator clock measured out time with relentless precision, each tick an eternity stretching between heartbeats. Descending, the old wood breathed beneath her cautious weight, each creak a betrayal, broadcasting her presence to whatever or whoever resided below. She reached the foyer's expanse, her phone's light scarcely denting the gloom. The drawing room lay to her left, the dining room to her right, the kitchen passage straight ahead. From which direction had the disturbance originated? A whisper of displaced air, a subtle stir from the drawing room guided her. Throat tight, she edged towards the archway, her free hand tracing the textured wallpaper, searching. The fingers brushed against the cool brass of a switch plate. She flicked it. Light flooded the space, painfully bright after the Stygian dark, forcing her eyes shut against the sudden glare. Blinking rapidly, her vision swam back into focus, and a choked gasp escaped her. The drawing room was a scene of utter disarray. Furniture lay overturned, books disgorged from shelves, delicate ornaments shattered across the parquet floor. And centered in this chaotic tableau stood emptiness. Yet she could have sworn, in that blinding instant before her pupils adjusted, she'd perceived a form, tall, ill-defined, more coalescence of shadow than substance. Now only the wreckage remained. Hello? She tried again, the word trembling. Is anyone actually here? Silence answered, profound and absolute, swallowing even the distant ticking of the clock. It pressed in, suffocating. Tentatively, she stepped further into the room. A sharp crunch underfoot. She hissed, looking down. Shards of glass from a fractured picture frame glittered against the dark wood. The photograph within depicted the Ashworths, patriarch, matriarch, 2 children, frozen in static smiles. But as she watched, transfixed, the image seemed to warp, the smiles stretching into silent screams, the eyes deepening into vacant pits. She recoiled with a sharp cry, the frame skittering away. When her gaze snapped back, the photograph was placid, the family's grins undisturbed. Rubbing her eyes fiercely, she wondered if sleep still held her, if this was some grotesque, hypnagogic theater. Then she felt it, an icy exhalation against the nape of her neck, raising constellations of goose flesh along her arms. She spun around, nothing, only the vacant archway, framing the impenetrable hallway beyond. This isn't amusing, she declared to the inanimate chaos, forcing anger into her tone to suppress the rising tide of fear. If you're here, show yourself. As if summoned, a low moan uncoiled through the house, sourceless yet omnipresent. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated anguish that vibrated deep in her bones. Stumbling backward, her foot caught the leg of an upended occasional table. She fell heavily, the impact expelling the air from her lungs. Gasping, she lay momentarily stunned. When breath returned, she pushed herself onto her elbows and froze. There, at the room's periphery, stood the figure, shadow given vague structure, its edges blurred, indistinct, yet undeniably humanoid, head, shoulders, arms hanging limply. She scrambled backward across the floor, a scream trapped, silent in her throat. The apparition remained static, swaying almost imperceptibly, like kelp in an unseen current, seemingly oblivious to her terror. What are you? The question emerged as a strangled whisper. The figure's head inclined towards her, though no features resolved within its tenebrous depths. Time stretched taut as they regarded each other across the ruined space, a tableau of primal fear meeting something else, A profound sadness, an aching loneliness, an indefinable emotion radiated from the spectral form. Then, with the suddenness of a snuffed candle flame, it was gone. One moment present, the next, simply not, leaving her utterly alone amidst the destruction. She remained seated on the floor for an immeasurable period, breath catching in ragged bursts, eyes darting frantically, searching the empty spaces. But only the overturned furniture, the scattered debris, and the heavy silence persisted. Finally, on legs that trembled violently, she rose. Escape. She needed to flee, to contact someone. The Ashworths, the authorities, a cleric, anyone. Turning towards the exit, however, movement snagged her attention. A book, flung open amidst the detritus on the floor. As she watched, its pages began to turn, riffling faster and faster, animated by an impossible wind in the utterly still room. Against all rational instinct, drawn by that same morbid curiosity, she moved closer. The frantic motion ceased as abruptly as it began, the book settling open to a specific spread. Leaning down, she squinted in the dim light. A local history, and there, circled in a disturbing rust-colored pigment that looked chillingly like dried blood, was a passage concerning this very house. Built 1887 by Thomas Ashworth, it read, long rumored to harbor unseen occupants. Local lore recounts a devastating fire in 1902, which tragically claimed Ashworth's wife and 2 young children. Ashworth himself vanished soon after, his fate unknown. Some whisper he succumbed to grief. Others contend his shade still traverses the halls of his former home, eternally seeking reunion with his lost family. A glacial chill traced her spine. The warped photograph, the family's faces contorted. Could it be? Was this place truly? A soft susurrus behind her made her whirl around. Hovering in the archway were not 1, but 4 columns of shadow. A tall one, presumably Thomas Ashworth, flanked by 3 smaller, slighter forms. They offered no movement, no sound. They simply stood, observing her with sightless intensity. She felt the palpable weight of their collective gaze, heavy with a century of solitude and sorrow. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the apology encompassing everything and nothing. "I didn't understand." The figures seemed to incline their heads in unison, acknowledgement perhaps, or absolution. Then, slowly, inexorably, they began to fade, their forms becoming increasingly translucent until they dissolved entirely into the ambient dimness. The regulator clock in the foyer chimed once more. 1 o'clock. Had only an hour elapsed? It felt like a lifetime compressed into 60 minutes. She sank back to the floor, strength deserting her limbs. The house was quiet now, but the quality of the silence had transformed. The oppressive weight was gone, replaced by a stillness that felt less like absence and more like peace. A long-held tension finally released. How long she sat there, absorbing the night's revelations, she couldn't say. When the first tentative fingers of dawn painted the tall windows gray, she finally stirred, muscles stiff, spirit bruised but strangely calm. Logic dictated flight. Call the Ashworths? Confess? What, exactly? An encounter with their ancestral ghosts? a psychotic episode resulting in vandalism. Neither narrative felt viable. Yet, as she rose, a peculiar certainty, an intuition deeper than reason, arrested her. This house, these lingering spirits, they weren't malevolent. They were adrift, saturated in loss, yearning for acknowledgement. Her gaze swept over the wreckage of the drawing room, and a decision formed, quiet but resolute. She would remain. She would restore order to this room, and she would delve deeper into the story of the Ashworth family. Perhaps, improbably, she could offer some measure of solace, help them find the tranquility they had sought for over 100 years. As she began the task, righting a fallen armchair, a sense of warmth enveloped her, gentle and pervasive, like an unseen comforting presence. And she knew, with a certainty that defied explanation, that she had chosen correctly. This house, steeped in secrets and sorrow, had somehow chosen her, and she would strive to honor that unlikely appointment. The phone's cold numerals pulsed, 11:47 p.m. Precisely then, the ascent shuddered to a halt, the lift cage sighing as it suspended itself somewhere in the void between the 32nd and 33rd floors of the Ethelred Tower. My thumb jabbed the emergency call button. Nothing. No strident alarm, no crackle of a speaker, only a profound, ringing silence that pressed in from all sides. Then, the floor indicator, a small screen above the doors, began a nonsensical pilgrimage through designations that had no place in our 40-story reality. I am Silas Thorne, tethered to the digital guts of Quantum Spire Holdings as IT support. Hours ago, escape should have been mine, but a server migration, a beast of complex code and blinking lights, had held me captive. Now, solitary in this metal box, I watched impossible numbers bloom and fade. 54, 67, 83. The car moved again, not with the familiar vertical heave, but with a sickening sideways shear, a motion that defied physics and churned my stomach into knots. When the doors slid open, the vista was alien. I stepped onto what felt like a film set, recreating the 1980s. Brown shag carpet muffled my steps. Hulking beige monitors presided over metal desks. The air was thick with the phantom scent of stale cigarette smoke. A woman, her silhouette defined by formidable shoulder pads and a cloud of teased hair, hammered at a keyboard. As she pivoted towards me, her face remained indistinct, a frustrating blur like a photograph snapped mid-motion. "Hello?" My voice sounded thin, swallowed by the strange acoustics. She offered no reply, her attention fixed on the archaic green text scrolling across her black screen. Behind me, the elevator chimed. A jolt of panic sent me scrambling back inside just as the doors began to glide shut, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. The indicator now read 12B. Another movement, this time accompanied by a grinding protest I'd never heard from the building's usually silent mechanisms. My hands trembled as I repeatedly stabbed the lobby button, a useless prayer. The display flickered, settling on 19X. The doors parted, revealing our floor, the 21st Century Quantum Spire offices, yet horribly wrong. Flora, desiccated and brittle, littered the ground. A fine layer of dust coated every surface. Papers swirled in unseen currents around overturned chairs. Through the panoramic windows, Where familiar skyscrapers should have pierced the night, a sky burned crimson above jagged ruins. The air itself felt hot, stagnant. From the corridor's depths, a sound emerged, a dragging, shuffling tread. I slammed the closed door button, the impact stinging my finger. The doors sealed just as a figure shambled around the corner, vaguely humanoid but with proportions stretched and warped unnervingly. My breath hitched in ragged gasps. Sweat traced cold paths down my spine. The lift moved once more. The display cycled through symbols, glyphs, and characters utterly foreign. The next stop presented our office as it had been just last week, and there I was, Silas Thorne, hunched over my terminal, wrestling with late-night code. This other me didn't react as I called out, my voice catching in my throat. I watched him check his phone, the same gesture, the same weary sigh, then begin packing his bag. I knew this moment precisely, the eve of the server migration. Compelled, I stepped fully onto the floor. "Silas," I yelled at my double. He walked straight towards the lift, oblivious, passing through me. And phantom brush of shoulder against shoulder, and the world canted violently. Pain, sharp and electric, lanced through my skull. I stumbled backward into the elevator car, dizzy, bile rising in my throat. My other self was gone. The indicator now displayed. The doors opened onto a server room, unlike any I knew, a cavernous space where rows upon rows of monolithic black cabinets marched into an oppressive darkness. Silent red warning lights pulsed like malevolent eyes. The air crackled, an almost tangible static raising the hairs on my arms. Before my horrified gaze, the servers began to liquefy. Black casings drooped and flowed like hot wax, dripping onto the floor in viscous pools. I hammered the button, desperate to escape the melting heart of the machine. My phone still read 11:47 p.m. The time hadn't surrendered a single second. A call to security died in a void of no signal. The screen flickered once, twice, then went black. Another halt. This time, the doors revealed the building's grand lobby, but submerged in an aqueous gloom. Fish, spectral and silent, drifted past the security console. Kelp swayed rhythmically where potted ficus trees once stood. Water lapped silently at the elevator's threshold, but refused to breach it. In the murky distance, something vast shifted, trailing too many fins. Floor after floor bled into a montage of the impossible, our workspace fortified for a forgotten war, sandbags piled by windows draped with stark propaganda. The office transformed into a humid terrarium, great trees bursting through ceiling panels, vines strangling desks. The familiar layout cordoned off with yellow tape, numbered evidence markers scattered across the floor, devoid of any human presence. My wristwatch remained stubbornly fixed at 11:47 p.m. The phone was a dead slab. I lost track of the phantom floors. The next arrival seemed blessedly normal. Our office empty, quiet. On my desk sat my coffee mug, a faint wisp of steam curling from its rim. My jacket was slung over my chair. My monitor glowed, displaying an error message. Timeline schism detected. Attempting reconciliation protocol. Hesitantly, I approached my workstation. The mug was undeniably mine. I recognized the small chip near the handle. The coffee radiated warmth. As I watched, the text on the screen shifted. Multiple instance conflict, initiating emergency containment. Abruptly, the building's fire alarm erupted, a deafening klaxon accompanied by the frantic pulse of red emergency strobes. I spun towards the elevator, but the doors had already sealed. The floor indicator now blazed error in crimson. My frantic jabs at the call button yielded nothing. From the stairwell, heavy footfalls echoed, drawing closer. The handle on the stairwell door began to turn. Ding. The elevator doors slid open. I threw myself inside as something immense and dark breached the office doorway, its movement jerky, unnatural, like flawed stop-motion animation. The elevator didn't descend, it plummeted, a gut-wrenching drop far exceeding its normal speed. The display became a frantic blur of every number and symbol I'd witnessed. Cables screamed in protest. When the doors next opened, I saw myself, me, Silas Thorne, weary from the server migration, stepping into this very elevator at 11:47 p.m., blissfully unaware. He looked tired, ready for home. I tried to cry out, to warn him, but my throat seized, emitting no sound. My past self pressed the lobby button. For a fleeting, terrible instant, our eyes met. His expression morphed from exhaustion to dawning, absolute terror. The doors slammed shut. The elevator convulsed violently, throwing me to my knees. The display became a digital blizzard, cycling through its impossible lexicon at impossible speed. Then, abrupt stillness. The doors opened, onto the lobby, the real lobby. The night security guard glanced up from his paper bag. "Everything all right, Mr. Thorne?" Could have sworn I heard that lift acting up. On legs that felt like borrowed stilts, I stepped out. My watch showed 11:48 p.m. My phone vibrated back to life, a cascade of delayed messages flooding the screen. "Fine," I managed, the word rough as gravel. "Everything's fine." The walk to my car in the subterranean garage felt hyper-real. Every echo seemed amplified. Driving home, my gaze flickered compulsively to the rearview mirror. Back in my apartment building, I took the stairs. The following day, the office hummed with normalcy. The server migration was declared a seamless success. No one mentioned flickering lights or impossible journeys. Yet sometimes, working late, the familiar hum of the building is punctuated by a faint, metallic grinding from the elevator shaft. Sometimes, catching the floor indicator from the corner of my eye, I see numbers that don't belong. I climb the 27 flights to my apartment now. Exercise, I tell colleagues. But last week, descending the stairwell, I glanced through the fire door window. Just for a second, I saw it, that burning crimson sky. And now, my phone, consulted late at night, will occasionally display 11:47 p.m., regardless of the hour. I've started searching for new employment, something low-rise, something firmly anchored to the ground floor, because I know what transpires at 11:47 p.m. in the Ethelred Tower. I know about the wrong floors, the phantom levels nested between the real ones, apertures into realities best left unseen. And I know that somewhere, perhaps in this very building, another Silas Thorne is still trapped in that ascending, descending cage, doors opening onto one impossibility after another, forever seeking the correct timeline Sometimes, in the deepest hours of the night, I wonder if the Silas Thorne who types this ever truly got out. A tremor ran through my hand as it hovered near the windshield's opaque veil of frost. 5 letters, sharp and deep, gouged into the ice, flicker. The sight alone constricted my airway. 23 years dissolved. I was 12 again, lost in the bleakness of that specific winter, a time when that name was last uttered. Here I stood, driveway asphalt biting cold through my soles at 6:45 a.m., briefcase a leather anchor at my feet, the steam from my travel mug a fleeting ghost in the sub-zero air. Dawn remained a promise beneath the horizon. My garage's motion sensor flared, catching the crystalline facets on the glass, illuminating the violation. The letters weren't merely sketched. They were carved with vicious intent, perhaps by a fingernail pressed hard against the frozen surface. My first naive thought, a prank by Clara, my wife. But Clara was oblivious to this ghost name. I'd buried it deep when I fled Oakhaven, telling no one. Hesitantly, my fingers brushed the F. The ice was thick, easily a quarter inch, the groove descending clear to the glass. No hasty scrawl, this. Someone had lingered, invested time. Headlights sliced across the driveway as a car passed on the street below. I flinched, a reflexive jerk that sent scalding coffee splashing across my silk tie, soaking through to sear my chest. The pain was distant. Fumbling for my phone, I captured 3 images of the name before frantically scraping it away with the edge of my credit card, my hand refusing to still. Tiny shards of ice rained onto the Toyota's hood. The garage light timed out, plunging me into deeper shadow. Silence reigned on the street. The neighboring houses remained dark eyesores. Sensible people slept. My early departure, a daily ritual to circumvent the Boston crawl, felt suddenly exposed. Inside the car, I slammed the locks. The leather seats were glacial. Gripping the wheel, I listened to the ragged rhythm of my own breathing, amplified in the confined quiet. 6:52 a.m. blinked accusingly from my phone. Late. A 9-hour presentation loomed, yet my hand wouldn't obey the command to turn the ignition key. Flicker, born of my unruly red hair, a taunt I despised, hearing Bowie's anthem echo down school hallways. But adolescent mockery wasn't the reason I'd shed the name, insisting on Leo from 7th grade onward. No, the reason lay buried much deeper than that. I scrolled through contacts, dialed Clara. 4 rings surrendered to voicemail. Her first alarm never stood a chance. "Hey, it's me," I began, my voice fracturing. Cleared my throat. This morning, did you write something on my car window? In the frost? Call me back." I disconnected, staring numbly at the screen. 6:54 a.m. Still no bleed of light in the eastern sky. Logic, cold and unwelcome, began to reassert itself. Neighborhood kids, surely. Maybe they'd overheard Clara call me Leo, scribbled random names as a lark. Perhaps every car wore a frosty tag. I exited the car again, crossing the brittle lawn to Mr. Henderson's adjacent driveway. His Honda, pristine frosted canvas. Across the street, the Davies family minivan slept under an undisturbed blanket of white, only mine. Back in the frigid sanctuary of my car, Google Maps illuminated the screen. Oak Haven, 4 hours north, a day trip there and back. Could I find him? Was he even still breathing? Madness, sheer insanity. The presentation, afternoon meetings stacked like dominoes. Driving 4 hours because of a childhood nickname resurrected in ice. Impossible. The engine protested, catching on the third turnover. The heater blasted frigid air. Shifting into reverse, my phone chirped alive. Clara's face smiled from the screen. "Hey, honey," her voice thick with sleep. "What's wrong? You okay?" "This morning," I forced out. "Did you write on my car?" "What?" "No. Leo, I just woke up. What are you talking about?" A long exhalation fogged the interior glass. "Nothing. Sorry I woke you. Go back to sleep." "Leo, what is going on?" "Nothing, really. See you tonight." I ended the call before the questions could deepen. The motion sensor light flared anew as I backed onto the street, triggered by my car's retreat. And that's when I saw it. A silhouette. A man standing sentinel at the foot of my driveway, a dark cutout against the pre-dawn gloom in my rearview mirror. My foot slammed the brake. I twisted around in my seat. Nothing. The sensor light illuminated only empty concrete, frost-kissed grass. My heart hammered a frantic tattoo against my ribs. The commute became an automaton's task. My mind, however, raced backward, unspooling memories of that winter, age 12. The derelict Thorn house at the dead end of Pine Street. The day they discovered Sam's small body crumpled in the basement. An accident, the police concluded. A fall down the stairs during play. But my memory held a different truth. I saw it, and so did the one who had christened me Flicker that very day. 8:15 a.m., I strode into the sterile lobby of my office building, late, but salvageably so. Time enough to skim the presentation notes. Focus, work would be an anchor. Ms. Albright glanced up from her meticulously organized desk as I passed. "Someone left this for you," she announced, gesturing toward my own desk. A crisp white envelope lay there, stark. No name, no return address. "Who brought it?" I asked, halting. "Building security dropped it off just a little while ago. Said someone left it at the front desk this morning." I picked it up. The paper felt substantial, expensive, the kind sourced from specialty shops, heavy with unspoken weight. Did they say who it was from? Ms. Albright shook her head, just that it was marked urgent. Sinking into my chair, I held the envelope. Unsealed, the flap merely tucked inside. It beckoned. My phone vibrated. A text from Clara. "Seriously worried about you. Please call me." Ignored. My hands, traitors once more, trembled as I slid out the single sheet of paper within. One sentence, inscribed in neat, deliberate black ink. "I know you saw me, Flicker." The paper fluttered from my grasp. Reaching for it, I knocked over my forgotten coffee mug. Brown liquid bled across my presentation notes, obscuring the neat bullet points. "Ms. Albright," I yelled, voice raw. "Who delivered this? What time exactly?" She materialized in my doorway, concern etched on her face. "Security brought it up maybe 15 minutes ago, around 8. Why? Mr. Vance, what's wrong?" "Call them. Find out who left it. Description, anything. Right now." She scurried back to her desk, the urgent tap of her keyboard audible. With unsteady fingers, I navigated my laptop, typing Oakhaven Chronicle archives into the search bar, clicking through digitized decades. There, December 12th, 1991. Local boy dies in tragic fall. Samuel Bell, age 13, found deceased after apparent accident in basement stairwell while playing with friends. No foul play suspected. The article omitted the friends' names, referring only to two other boys present, me and Evan Thorne. Evan Thorne, the boy who'd branded me Flicker. Ms. Albright returned, looking flustered. Security says it was a courier drop-off. Paid cash, no name given. They do have security footage if you want to view it. Yes, tell them I'm coming down immediately. The security office resided in the building's subterranean depths. Gray concrete, humming fluorescent tubes, two guards presiding over a wall of monitors with bored resignation. Here's the feed from this morning, one stated, clicking through camera angles. The lobby, 7:45 a.m. A figure emerged, man, dark overcoat, hat pulled low, obscuring his features. He approached the security desk, handed over an envelope, turned and exited. Can you zoom in? I requested, leaning closer. The guard manipulated his mouse. The image pixelated as it enlarged. Still, the face remained elusive shadow. What about exterior cameras? The street? More clicks. The man walking briskly away from the building, melting into a black SUV parked down the block. No license plate discernible. That's the extent of it, the guard sighed. Want us to involve the police? I shook my head, a knot tightening in my gut. No, thank you. Back in the suffocating privacy of my office, I closed the door and collapsed into my chair. The spilled coffee had dried to ugly Rorschach blots on my notes, rendering them useless. My phone displayed 3 missed calls from Clara, 2 unheard voicemails. I couldn't face her concern, not yet. Google beckoned again. Search, Evan Thorne, Oakhaven. Scant results surfaced, a faded high school basketball score from '96, a terse marriage announcement, 1999. Then, jarringly recent, local man reported missing October 2023. Evan Thorne, age 44, last seen leaving work at Oakhaven Hardware. Vehicle discovered abandoned on Route 7. Authorities report no signs of foul play. 4 months ago, around the time Clara and I had moved into our suburban dream house, my chest constricted. The intercom buzzed, Ms. Albright's voice startlingly loud. Mr. Vance, your NINU presentation begins in 5 minutes. Cancel it, I said, the words tasting like ash. Cancel everything on my schedule today. Family emergency. Are you certain? The CEO is expecting. Cancel it all. Grabbing my coat and briefcase, I bypassed the elevator, opting for the echoing stairwell. Too confining, too slow. In the parking garage, paranoia dictated a cautious sweep around my car before unlocking it. Engine on, heater blasting, I pointed the car north towards Oakhaven. The 4-hour drive became a crucible of memory. Too much time alone with the ghosts. That day in the Thorne house, the air thick with dust motes, dancing in slivers of light. Hide and seek, Sam counting, Evan and I scattering. I chose the basement, shadowed, cluttered with forgotten furniture and collapsing boxes, a perfect oubliette behind a stack of warped crates. Evan followed minutes later, found Sam at the foot of the stairs. An accident, Evan had hissed, eyes wide but cold. He startled me. I just pushed. He'd made me swear silence. We'll both be blamed. We concocted the story of discovering him later, two frightened boys finding their friend after a tragic mishap. The police bought it, but I saw Evan descend those stairs after Sam, saw the deliberate shove, not a reaction of surprise, saw the chilling flicker of something dark in his eyes as Sam tumbled backward. That's when he started calling me Flicker, every day, a constant whispered reminder. I know you saw. You're part of this now. Oakhaven materialized, unchanged yet utterly alien. The same compact downtown, brick facades weathered, signs faded like old photographs. Population 4,327, the welcome sign proclaimed, a number that felt both too large and too small. The Thorn house was gone, erased. A neat ranch-style home stood in its place, blandly suburban. I drove past my childhood home, repainted, but the porch where I'd devoured comics remained, the ancient oak still casting long shadows across the lawn. Oakhaven Hardware anchored the end of Main Street, its fluorescent lights casting a pale glow into the waning winter afternoon. The bell above the door jingled, a sound plucked directly from memory. The scent of paint thinner and sawdust filled the air. An old man, Silas, peered up from behind the cluttered counter. "Help ya?" "I'm looking for Evan Thorne," I said, my voice sounding unfamiliar, strained. "He used to work here." Silas's expression shuddered. "Police asked all their questions 4 months back. Ain't nothing new." "I'm an old friend. Just heard about him being missing." He squinted, studying my face. "Don't place you?" "Moved away years ago. Leo Vance. Went by a different name back then." Recognition sparked, faint but definite in his aged eyes. "Flicker? The little red-headed kid?" I offered a tight nod. He shuffled around the counter, shorter than my memory painted him. Or perhaps I'd just grown taller. "Evan was acting peculiar those last few weeks," Silas confided, lowering his voice. "Spooked. Said someone was watching him, following his car, sitting outside his house." "Did he say who?" Silas shook his head slowly. "Police looked into it. Found Zip. Then his car shows up empty out on Route 7. No struggle, no note. Just vanished." "Is his house still?" "Yep. End of Pine Street. Wife cleared out not long after. Too many ghosts, I reckon." Pine Street unfolded slowly beneath my tires. Evan's house stood dark, brooding. A for sale sign tilted forlornly in the frozen yard. Dead leaves carpeted the porch like shed skin. A police cruiser idled past, the officer's gaze lingering on my unfamiliar car. Small-town scrutiny. Strangers were anomalies. My phone rang. Clara again. This time I answered. "Leo, where are you?" she demanded, fear sharpening her tone. "Ms. Albright said you left work. Family emergency. Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Just had something I needed to check out." "Check what? You're scaring me half to death." "I'll explain everything tonight, I promise." "Leo." I hung up before her worry could fully engulf me. The sun dipped low, painting the snow-dusted street in long, melancholic shadows. A flicker of movement snagged my peripheral vision. Someone moving in Evan's backyard, weaving between the skeletal trees. I parked, the engine falling silent, leaving an unnerving quiet. My shoes crunched on the icy grass as I approached. The back gate swung open with a rusty groan. The figure had vanished around the corner of the house. Heart pounding, I followed. An empty back porch, barren flower beds rimed with frost. No one. Then a reflection in the grimy kitchen window caught the fading light. More writing etched into the exterior frost. Your turn to hide, flicker. My legs buckled. I gripped the porch railing for support. Footsteps sounded behind me. Slow, measured, deliberate. I spun around. Evan Thorne stood there. Older, lines etched deeper around his mouth, threads of gray striping his dark hair. But the eyes, those same chillingly cold eyes, held the same calculating smile. "Been waiting, Leo," he said, his voice unnervingly calm. "Knew you couldn't stay away forever. Not once I found you." "You're missing," I stammered. A low chuckle escaped him. Amazing what a few well-placed rumors and a conveniently abandoned car can achieve, especially when the local police aren't inclined to dig too deep. Why? Why now? Saw you'd moved back east. Nice place in the suburbs. Pretty wife. Good career. Looked like the perfect life. He took a step closer, forcing me back against the railing. "Must be nice," he murmured, the words laced with venom. "Living clean, no guilt weighing you down, while I carried that basement Sam's face, the sound he made, for 30 years. It wasn't an accident, the words tore from me, finally voiced after decades of silence. I saw you push him. Ah, the confession, after all this time. Another step closed the distance between us. Too late for apologies now, Flicker. Far too late. His hand rose, metal glint dully in the twilight. I bolted across the frozen yard, past my car, legs pumping, lungs burning. Didn't dare look back until I hit the relative safety of Main Street's dim streetlights. The yard behind me was empty. No Evan, no threat, just deepening shadows. I drove straight to the Oak Haven police station, the story tumbling out, the frost on my car, the note at work, Evan in his own backyard, the threat. They dispatched a car, checked the house thoroughly. Nothing. No footprints disturbed the frost other than my own. No writing on any windows. Mr. Thorne remains a missing person, the weary desk sergeant explained. 4 months now. No evidence of foul play then. No evidence he's even alive now. I insisted, brandished my phone. The pictures of my windshield showed only clear glass. The note from my office, a blank sheet of expensive paper. They treated me with polite condescension, suggesting stress, perhaps lingering guilt over a childhood trauma playing tricks on my mind. The drive home was a long, dark tunnel. I called Clara, mumbled reassurances, blamed a need to confront old ghosts. Pulled into my driveway at 11:30 p.m. The house was dark, save for the porch light's lonely vigil. Fresh frost had formed on my windshield, clean this time. Inside, I checked every lock, set the alarm system. Clara slept soundly beside me. I lay awake, staring at the indifferent ceiling, the silence pressing in. My phone, resting on the nightstand, buzzed softly. An unknown number. A single text message. Found you. Rising, I crept to the window, peering out into the silent street. Empty. The motion sensor remained dark, but the certainty settled deep in my bones, cold and heavy as dread. He was out there, watching, waiting, leaving messages in the frost. It was my turn to hide. The terrifying truth was, He'd had 30 years to perfect this game, and I was rapidly running out of places to run. This memory remains etched, a shard of ice beneath the skin, impervious to the thaw of years. I have never spoken of it. It belongs to a frigid dawn, decades past, from my time on that solitary acreage nestled deep in the countryside. Rising before the sun was habit then, a ritual involving worn boots, a thick coat, and the company of my dog, Rook, on walks through the sleeping land. There was solace in the quiet, a stark beauty in the final descent of the moon over frost-kissed fields. But the events of that particular morning fractured my perception of the crepuscular hours irrevocably. I recall the air's razor edge, each exhalation a fleeting ghost before my face, as Rook and I traced the perimeter of our property. True dawn was still a promise whispered below the horizon. The sky held that profound, bruised indigo. The earth beneath my boots was unyielding, resonant with the scent of cold soil and residual dew. Beside me, Rook padded, his nose mapping the ground, pausing intermittently, a sentinel surveying his domain. He habitually trotted a few paces ahead, ears pricked, intent. Silence reigned over the fields, broken only by the tentative chirps of birds stirring in the distance. We arrived at the dilapidated fence, marking the boundary between our land and an umbrageous thicket of trees and dense undergrowth. Familiar territory. A few warped planks offered easy passage onto a slender trail winding within. That pocket of woods always felt steeped in shadow, the canopy thick, the underbrush closing in like green jaws on either side. Rook never hesitated, plunging through the tangle, leaving me to follow, ducking low-hanging limbs. My flashlight usually remained dormant. The path was known by heart, by feel. On this morning, however, an impulse led me toward a shortcut, a less trodden capillary path, promising a quicker route to an open meadow beyond the woods. The air here seemed tangibly colder, heavier. Ahead, I could hear the distinct rustle of Rook's paws disturbing the leaf litter. Stillness enveloped us. No breeze stirred, amplifying every minute crackle and snap into significance. And then abruptly, Rook froze, utterly immobile, his body rigid, ears like twin daggers aimed forward. His tail went stiff as iron. A cold fist clenched around my own chest. I halted, straining my ears against the profound quiet. Nothing, not a whisper of movement. My pulse began a frantic drum against my ribs, a rhythm I tried to dismiss. "What is it, boy?" I murmured, the sound swallowed by the hush. He offered no bark, no growl. He simply stood, poised in absolute, unnerving expectation. Hesitantly, I crept forward, my gaze sweeping the periphery, but the darkness clung thick and viscous. Reluctantly, I thumbed the switch on my flashlight. Its beam sliced through the gloom, illuminating the narrow way ahead, a mosaic of branches, fallen leaves, clumps of tall, dormant grass. Then a flicker of movement to my left, screened by a low sprawl of bushes. A dark form, hunched low to the ground. A feral dog, perhaps? A coyote? Wolves were specters here, rarely seen. The angle was poor, the shape indistinct. Rook emitted a low, guttural whine, retreating a step to press his flank hard against my leg. Adrenaline surged, a bitter electric tide, and my heart hammered violently. Slowly, deliberately, I shifted my stance, angling the light. The shape resolved slightly. A patch of coarse black fur came into view, tangled, dense, matted in grotesque clumps. It seemed too substantial for a dog, yet lacked the bulk of a bear. A gaunt wolf, I reasoned, or some large stray ravaged by the wild. Then it turned. A face, or something approximating one, swung into the light. A definite snout and twin eyes that captured the beam, reflecting it back as a flat, jaundiced gleam. My mouth turned to dust. My knees locked. Rook commenced a low, resonant growl, a vibration I felt through my own bones. The creature held its position for a heartbeat, seemingly assessing us, gauging the threat. Paralysis held me fast. My hand trembled around the flashlight's cold metal casing. My breath snagged in my throat. Questions swarmed. Wolf? Escaped? Diseased? But found no purchase. Before thought could crystallize into action, it moved. It elevated its upper body. It rose onto its hind legs. The motion wasn't clumsy or tentative. It was fluid, unnervingly sinuous. It straightened, balancing with impossible ease, and stared directly at me. Speech died in my throat. Blinking felt like a forgotten reflex. A glacial chill spread across my skin despite the layers of clothing. My heart threatened to batter its way out of my ribcage. Standing thus, the creature was tall, matching my own height easily. Its forelimbs dangled at its sides, unnaturally long, ending in shapes I couldn't quite discern. Its head canted slightly, as if striving for a clearer perspective. The thudding in my ears became the world's only sound, accompanied by the acrid taste of panic rising in my gullet. Every instinct screamed, flee. Yet my limbs remained leaden anchors. I could only stare, transfixed. How long we stood locked in that tableau, I cannot say. Seconds stretched into an eternity, measured only by Rook's strained panting and the soft scuff of his paws on the dirt. Then, without preamble, the creature pivoted and stepped sideways into the dense labyrinth of brush to our left. It remained upright, bipedal, parting branches with an eerie facility as it vanished from sight. No grunt, no snarl, only the receding susurrus of disturbed foliage. It moved with swiftness, with an unsettling familiarity, like a person traversing a well-known passage. The instant it disappeared, the air rushed back into my lungs in a ragged gasp. I realized I'd been suffocating. My entire frame felt brittle, locked tight, my brow slick with cold sweat. Rook erupted in a series of short, sharp barks that ricocheted through the trees. The sound jolted me from my stupor. I fumbled for his collar, my fingers clumsy with tremors, nearly dropping the flashlight. Get out, back to the house, now. The visceral dread remained, a hollow ache deep in my stomach. I forced motion into my legs, heavy as stone, turning back the way we came, practically towing Rook beside me. He continued his frantic barking, but I applied gentle pressure to his collar, urging silence. Drawing further attention felt profoundly unwise. My mind relentlessly replayed the sequence, the matted fur, the hunched posture, the ghastly elegance of its ascent. Each mental image sent fresh jolts of adrenaline through me. I fought the urge to scan the trees, picturing the thing lurking behind every trunk, watching, waiting. A constriction seized my chest. My breathing grew shallow. I forced myself to focus solely on the path, unwinding before the wavering beam of light. The return journey felt immeasurably longer, the woods somehow denser, darker. The flashlight beam seemed to falter, though I knew it was only my frayed nerves diminishing its power. Rook eventually fell silent, but remained plastered to my side, head low, eyes darting nervously. I resisted the powerful urge to run, reasoning that a steady pace was safer, less likely to induce panic or a fall. Inside, however, a primal scream urged me to sprint. Finally, through the latticework of trees, the familiar silhouette of the fence emerged. Relief washed over me, potent and sharp. I hastened toward the loose plank, shoved it aside, and scrambled through. Rook needed no coaxing. He slipped through behind me, tail still tucked low. The open fields on our side of the boundary felt marginally safer, the trees fewer, the distant outline of the house a beacon. The sky had begun its slow surrender to dawn, softening to a pale, oyster gray. Soon, sunlight would impose its familiar order. But in that moment, the fear clung like icy tendrils. I walked rapidly, casting frequent glances over my shoulder. Nothing but crows lifting from a faraway fence post disturbed the scene. The air carried the clean scent of wet grass, a damp chill penetrating my coat. My body still quivered uncontrollably. Rook remained quiet, panting softly, his vigilance unwavering. Reaching the house, I fumbled with the keys, my shaking hands betraying me, taking several attempts to engage the lock. The door swung inward, revealing the familiar, comforting stillness of the house. I stumbled across the threshold, slammed the door shut, turned the deadbolt, and sagged against the solid wood. My breath came in ragged, shallow bursts. My skin felt clammy. Rook pressed close, looking up, his ears still flattened. Kneeling, I buried my hands in his fur, seeking solace, trying to regulate the wild cadence of my heart. For long minutes, I remained there, grappling with the immediate future. Who could I tell? The sheriff? Wildlife services? What possible account could I give? Saw a tall, furry thing walking on two legs? Disbelief, perhaps ridicule, seemed the most likely response. They might humor me with a cursory search or dismiss it outright. Explaining it without sounding unhinged felt impossible. My throat was raw, my mouth parched. Exhaustion settled deep in my bones. Rising stiffly, I shed my boots by the door and moved to the kitchen. Water, gulped straight from the tap, did little to quell the inner turmoil. The image of the creature rising, its eyes catching the light, that moment replayed, a loop of pure, visceral terror. Another deep breath. Leaning against the counter, I fought for composure. Perhaps it was merely an anomaly, a strangely injured coyote, its perceived height an illusion born of panic. Yet the fluid, deliberate way it stood, the sheer unnaturalness of it, that felt undeniable. Methodically, I moved through the house, checking every window, securing every lock, an unprecedented precaution for early morning. I drew the blinds, craving insulation from the outside world, from the gnawing sense that something watched from the periphery. Rook shadowed my every move, a small, tense satellite. When the house felt secure, I retreated to the living room couch and simply sat, staring blankly at the opposite wall, Rook a warm, anxious weight at my feet. Eventually, Sunlight pierced the gaps in the blinds, painting stripes across the floor. The house gradually shed some of its acquired menace. I ventured a peek outside. The fields lay serene under a brightening sky, the horizon blushing faintly. Ordinarily, I cherished this nascent light. That day, it felt alien, insufficient. My eyes kept scanning the tall grass, half expecting to see a dark silhouette moving against the landscape. Hours passed in this state, the encounter replaying endlessly. A part of me, the part conditioned by years on the land, felt an urge to return, to search for tracks, tangible proof to anchors unbelievable. But a stronger, colder part recoiled, terrified of what confirmation might truly mean, terrified of another encounter. Curiosity warred with a profound, newly instilled fear. I attempted normalcy, fed Rook, attended to rudimentary chores around the ranch, but my focus remained fractured, my senses hyper-alert. Every rustle of leaves beyond the windows drew a flinch. A distant howl, the bark of a neighbor's dog, sounds that were once background noise, now triggered a surge of anxiety. Rook mirrored my unease, sticking close, his usual explorations abandoned, ears perpetually cocked. The thought of confiding in a neighbor surfaced, then submerged. Had anyone else witnessed something inexplicable in the pre-dawn hours? The desire for shared experience wrestled with the fear of judgment. Ranch folk had their share of strange tales, often embellished or dismissed as folklore. I had no desire to become the source of such a story, the man who saw phantoms in the woods. The secret felt safer locked inside. Days bled into weeks. Routine reasserted its rhythm, albeit altered. My walks with Rook continued, but confined to open spaces, and never before the sun had climbed well into the sky. I cultivated an outward semblance of normality, yet jumped at shadows, tensed at unexpected movements, glimpsed at the edge of my vision. Strange nocturnal sounds froze me in place. I never saw the creature again. Sometimes, gazing at the dark, brooding line of trees on the horizon, I'd wonder, was it still there, concealed within the shadows, or had it merely passed through? The deeper woods remained forbidden territory, especially near dawn, and the story remained untold. Time has passed, yet the memory retains its sharp edges. The texture of that matted fur, the ghastly fluidity of its rise onto two legs, the flat, knowing intensity in those reflected eyes. Its behavior transcended the animalian. It felt aberrant, imbued with a disturbingly familiar awareness. These are thoughts I keep tethered, managed best by not dwelling on the impossible nature of what it might have been. That is the entirety of it. I have not revisited that specific locus in the woods. No neighbor has heard this tale, nor will they. Mostly the memory lies dormant, but sometimes, in the liminal state between sleep and waking, in the deep quiet of early morning, the image surfaces, tall, dark, bipedal, solitary in the wilderness, and the fear returns, cold and absolute, a reminder that the wild holds spaces beyond our neat categorizations, shadows that defy understanding. I claim no knowledge of what it was. I know only what I saw, and that is sufficient reason to forever glance over my shoulder when venturing out before the sun. A dissonance snagged Elias's attention in the pre-dawn quiet, that specific hush around 5 when the city still dreamt, but the sky began to bleed color. He'd risen early, a familiar ritual driven by the anxieties of managing this crumbling edifice, checking for the usual betrayals of age, leaks, shorts, phantom noises. Through the hallway's fractured window pane, the courtyard below swam in nascent light, a soft luminescence sharp enough to etch long, skeletal shadows from the gnarled trees and utilitarian metal benches. Then he saw him, a figure near the far wall, methodically sweeping. An ordinary sight made extraordinary, instantly chilling. As Elias focused, his breath hitched. The low, angled sun struck the man directly, yet no silhouette bloomed on the concrete beside him. The broom, yes, its shadow stretched thin and dark, but the man himself? An absence? A void where darkness should have pooled. A knot tightened low in Elias's gut, a visceral rejection of what his eyes reported. He squinted, pressing closer to the cool, flawed glass, a film of sleep deprivation, perhaps distorting reality. Responsibility for this building rested heavy on Elias's shoulders. It was a behemoth of tired brick and sighing pipes, demanding constant vigilance. Nocturnal patrols had become second nature, born of worry over failing infrastructure. But this morning offered no mundane malfunction, no sputtering fuse. It offered a man disconnected from the physics of light. Compelled, Elias descended. His limbs felt leaden, his pulse a frantic drum against his ribs. The stairwell air hung thick and damp, redolent of time, wet concrete, and creeping mold. This place breathed decay. Its corridors pulsed with the hesitant flicker of bulbs Elias perpetually intended to replace. His own footfalls seemed too loud, echoing unnervingly in the enclosed space, amplifying his unease. He reached the heavy metal door buffering the courtyard, its hinges groaning a metallic complaint as he pushed it open. The sweeper glanced up, a brief, incurious movement, before resuming the rhythmic shh of bristles on stone. Elias stepped onto the flagstones, eyes locked on the figure. The sun, climbing higher, now cast definitive shadows from the terracotta pots and weathered benches. Still, the man remained an anomaly, his form untethered from any corresponding darkness on the ground. The sheer wrongness of it prickled Elias's scalp, tightening the muscles in his neck. He felt the fine hairs on his forearms lift. Logic, his usual anchor, the organizer of tenant complaints, budgets, repair schedules, offered no purchase here. He who prided himself on practicality felt his own senses betraying him. He cleared his throat, the sound thin in the open air. "Hey," he began. The name Abel, wasn't it? Feeling uncertain on his tongue, he vaguely recalled a handyman, someone contracted briefly by the previous cleaning service, glimpsed but never truly registered. "Can you hear me?" Another step forward, the crunch of loose gravel underfoot. Slowly, with an almost cinematic deliberation, the man turned. Elias met his eyes, and a shard of ice seemed to pierce his spine. They were clouded, milky, lacking the distinct geography of iris and pupil. A vacant gaze that slid across Elias without docking, without recognition. Elias's chest constricted. Words failed him. His throat suddenly parched and tight. The figure turned back, resuming his task. The relentless scraping filled the silence. A subtle zephyr stirred the air, carrying an unseasonal, penetrating cold that raised gooseflesh. The leaves on the courtyard trees rustled, a sound distinct from the stillness of the broader morning. Elias retreated a step, heart hammering, palms beginning to slick with sweat. He forced his voice out again, striving for steadiness. "Hello? Are you—" He swallowed, the effort painful. "Are you new?" Silence was the only reply, punctuated by the steady sweep, sweeps, sweep. Elias scanned the man's attire, dark gray work clothes, oddly dated, the fabric worn smooth in places. No company logo, no name badge. His feet seemed planted firmly enough, yet the ground behind them remained stubbornly unshadowed. A wave of helplessness washed over Elias. One part of him yearned to stride forward, grasp the man's shoulder, demand answers. But a deeper primal instinct screamed caution, a visceral dread that warned against contact. The breeze gusted again, colder this time, confirming the warning. He backed away, retreating towards the building's entrance. Records. He needed records, facts to tether this experience to reality. If this was a new hire, some forgotten arrangement, paperwork would exist. He hurried inside, the heavy door thudding shut with finality. He took the stairs 2 at a time, keys jangling a frantic rhythm in his pocket, his breath coming short. Back in his apartment, he went straight to the old wooden filing cabinet, its drawers protesting with a screech as he yanked them open. Contracts, invoices, maintenance logs, he kept everything. Folder after folder yielded nothing. His hands trembled, blurring the text. Sweat beaded on his forehead. The building's plumbing gurgled faintly within the walls, a sound usually ignored, now grating on his frayed nerves. He sifted through years of documentation. The agreement with the defunct cleaning company held no mention of an able, nor any on-site caretaker matching the description in the last decade. The building hadn't employed such a person for years. Nausea churned within him. It made no sense. He knew he'd seen this man before, fleetingly handling minor tasks. Yet the paper trail was blank. He slammed the drawer shut, the sound echoing the turmoil in his chest. He forced deep breaths, trying to quell the rising panic. A glance at the clock, nearly 6:30. The sun, fully risen now, painted the world outside in ordinary light. He had to look again. Had he hallucinated the impossible eyes, the missing shadow? The memory felt too solid, too chillingly real. He descended once more. The familiar hallway seemed colder now, despite the summer morning. His joints ached with tension. Pushing open the courtyard door, warm sunlight struck his face, forcing him to blink. He scanned the space, empty. The sweeper was gone. No broom leaned against the wall. No disturbance marked the concrete. Nothing amiss save for the lingering unease coiling in his own stomach. Perhaps the neighbors. Others rose early. He knocked on a few doors along the ground floor corridor. Bleary-eyed residents in robes offered confused stares. Had they seen a janitor sweeping at dawn? Head shakes. One neighbor quipped about Elias working too hard. Another advised more sleep. No corroboration. No one had seen a thing. The rest of that day, Elias spent cloistered in his apartment, poring over the records again, chasing ghosts in the paperwork. The old cleaning company's number was disconnected. Every lead dissolved into nothing. Exhaustion settled deep in his bones by evening. Television offered no distraction. The image of those vacant eyes, the impossible absence of a shadow, superimposed itself onto the screen. Sleep, when it finally came, was shallow and haunted. He woke before dawn the next day, around 4:30, body stiff, eyes gritty. Coffee was a tasteless ritual. He returned to his post by the hallway window. The sky was a deep, bruised purple, just hinting at the orange to come. As light seeped back into the world, the figure materialized in the courtyard. Rigid posture, deliberate movements, the broom gliding across the stone. Elias's heart resumed its frantic rhythm. That familiar prickling awareness crawled over his skin. Fists clenched, he watched, forcing a semblance of calm. Cracking the window open, he listened, only the abrasive whisper of the broom. Swallowing hard against the dryness in his throat, he resolved to face him again. Heavy-legged, he navigated the descent, past the flickering bulb, through the miasma of damp decay. Entering the courtyard, he found the man in the far corner, sweeping near a cluster of dead leaves shed by the ancient trees. The rising sun threw sharp, defined shadows from everything, except him. Elias's skin felt clammy. "Abel?" he called, louder this time, the name tasting like ash. The sweeper paused, head rotating towards the sound. Those same dull, lifeless eyes met his. A gust of frigid air swirled around Elias. The branches overhead shivered. He suppressed a shudder, forcing himself closer, ignoring the frantic protests of his gut. No words came from the man. Elias was near enough now to see the pallor of his skin, the faint lines that might have been wrinkles or fissures. He searched for the right question, something to pierce the silence. "Are you with a cleaning service?" he tried, his voice betraying a tremor. "We don't have an on-site custodian. Who sent you?" No reply. The man simply turned back to his sweeping. The monotonous sound grated, fueling a strange mix of anger and escalating fear. Elias felt trapped between the urge to flee and the desperate need to understand. He reached out, hand trembling, aiming to tap the man's shoulder. Inches away, just before contact, another blast of cold air struck him, stronger this time, whipping leaves into a frantic dance around his feet. The trees thrashed. He froze, heart pounding violently, mouth caught and dry. The air itself felt charged, resistant, warning him off. His instincts screamed. He snatched his hand back, fingertips tingling sharply. The man swept on, oblivious, immutable. Elias backed away slowly, the knot in his throat choking him. What now? His mind raced, but no coherent thought formed. He retreated into the hallway, the heavy door clicking shut. He leaned against the frame, breathing hard, trying to regain equilibrium. The building's interior felt unnaturally warm after the courtyard's chill. Sweat plastered his shirt to his back. He needed a different approach, something older. The basement archives, a locked room containing the building's deeper history. His manager's key granted access. He descended into the earth, the air growing cooler, thicker, with the scent of dust and mildew. Fumbling for the switch, he illuminated rows of metal shelving laden with forgotten boxes. He began the painstaking process, opening brittle cardboard, sifting through ledgers and logs yellowed with age. 10 years back, then 20. Notes on plumbing, wiring, long-forgotten tenants, mentions of past staff, a gardener whose description didn't fit, temporary repairmen. Hours bled away under the flickering bulb's unsteady gaze. Nothing explained the shadowless sweeper. Defeated, Elias sank onto a metal stool, rubbing his temples against the burgeoning headache induced by stale air and eye strain. One last check. He locked the basement, climbed back towards the light. The courtyard was now bathed in full morning sun. Birds chirped, distant traffic hummed, mundane sounds overlaying the profound strangeness. Then he saw it, the broom, leaning against the far wall, abandoned. He approached cautiously, reached out. The wooden handle felt unnaturally cold, though perhaps it was just the ambient temperature. He lifted it, plain, unmarked, its bristles stiff and visibly worn. An artifact from another time. Holding it sent a fresh chill through him. He replaced it carefully, stepping back. Days dissolved into a disquieting pattern. Each dawn brought the sweeper, his shadowless presence, his relentless, silent task. Each dawn brought Elias, drawn by a morbid compulsion to witness and attempt contact. Each attempt was met with the same vacant stare, the same impenetrable silence, the same wave of unnatural cold that seemed to emanate from the figure. Sleep became a luxury Elias could no longer afford, his waking hours consumed by the mystery, his nights haunted by it. He questioned the older residents again, pressing for details about long-ago caretakers. Vague recollections surfaced, someone decades ago perhaps, but nothing concrete, no name, no story that resonated. Most dismissed his inquiries with weary indulgence, attributing his fixation to stress. Each morning confrontation left him more frayed, heart pounding, hands slick, the cold seeping deeper into his bones. The approach of dawn became a source of profound dread. The old building, with its creaks and drafts, felt less like a workplace and more like a cage, shared with something inexplicable. He began locking his apartment door with obsessive care, a futile gesture against an entity unbound by normal rules. On the 8th morning of this ordeal, Elias woke raw-nerved before his alarm. Exhaustion warred with hypervigilance. He dragged himself to the window. Predictably, the sweeper was there, moving across the flagstones under the dim, emerging light. Elias watched, his stomach a tight knot of apprehension. Sweat prickled his brow. His throat felt like sandpaper. He had to go down. The compulsion was stronger than the fear. Slow steps on the stairs. The familiar creak of the courtyard door. The figure stood near the center this time. Elias called his name, a name he didn't even know, just a sound pushed into the void. The slow turn, the empty gaze, the turn back. The cold breeze arrived on cue, making his teeth chatter despite the mild air. Nausea twisted inside him. His legs felt unsteady. "I know you're not in the records," he managed, the words trembling. "Who are you? Why are you here?" Only the scrape, scrape, scrape answered. He stood rooted, staring, muscles rigid. His breathing grew shallow, ragged. His chest ached. The broom moved with hypnotic slowness. He noticed his own hands shaking violently. Darkness encroached on the edges of his vision. The wind gusted again, swirling dust and leaves. He pressed his back against the rough brick wall for support, fighting the urge to collapse. After a long moment, he wrestled his breathing back under control, turned, and stumbled back inside. The tension remained, a physical weight on his shoulders, but the oppressive cold receded. Through the door, he could still faintly hear the broom, an endless, scraping whisper that echoed in his mind. He reached his apartment in a haze, bolted the door and leaned against it, heart hammering, clothes damp. Logic offered no solace. Hallucination? Stress? A trick of the weary eye? Yet the sensory details persisted. The sound, the cold, the distinct lack of shadow, those terrifyingly blank eyes meeting his. And so it remains. Each morning before sunrise, the cycle repeats. No records explain him, no neighbor sees him. Elias wakes, descends, observes. He stands in the courtyard, a lone witness to the impossible. He tries to speak, and the cold pushes back. The sweeper offers no sign, no word, just the relentless motion of the broom and that hollow gaze that seems to look through Elias, through the building, through time itself. The old structure holds its secrets close, offering no end to this haunting rhythm. Elias is left, suspended in the pre-dawn chill, perpetually confronting a question made manifest, a man without a shadow, sweeping away the quiet hours. The migration to Stillwater Creek promised sanctuary. City clamor, a relentless, grinding cacophony, had worn Ilara thin, the press of bodies a constant, suffocating weight. Here, nestled on the town's fringe, where civilization frayed into forest, stood her acquired solace, a modest house breathing sylvan air. Proximity to nature, the allure of profound quietude, beckoned, and initially, tranquility delivered. Dawn arrived not with claxons, but birdsong. Mornings unfolded to the susurrus of leaves, a gentle counterpoint to the urban roar she'd fled. Isolation, once a fear, began to feel like embrace. Stillwater Creek was seeding itself within her. Yet, barely a fortnight passed before fissures spiderwebbed across that newfound peace. It began subtly, seeded one evening after lingering late in town, reconnecting with a familiar face from her past life. Returning under a bruised twilight, the house exhaled a different energy, an unfamiliar stillness. Dismissing the prickle as fatigue's phantom limb, Ilara entered, the familiar ritual of lock turning and light killing preceding her ascent to bed. But the sensation persisted, tenacious. An unnatural hush saturated the rooms, silence so profound it felt like a held breath. Sleep proved elusive, her consciousness snagged on the edges of darkness, ears straining against the void. Around the second hour past midnight, a sound materialized from the quiet, faint, dry, abrasive. A scraping, originating somewhere beyond the walls. Ilara lay rigid, listening, her pulse a frantic drum against her ribs. Slipping from bed, she ghosted to the window, parting the curtain just enough to scan the perimeter. The yard lay vacant, beneath the indifferent moon. The woods loomed, an impenetrable bastion of shadow. Then silence resumed its reign. A branch, perhaps, wind worried against the siding, or some nocturnal creature foraging. She retreated to the perceived safety of her covers, pulling them high, and eventually exhaustion claimed her. Morning light dissolved the night's anxieties. A thorough inspection of the house's exterior yielded nothing. No errant branches, no disturbed earth, no vestige of animal passage. She chided herself for succumbing to frayed nerves, attributing the incident to an overactive imagination fueled by solitude. The day proceeded uneventfully, but nightfall resurrected the unease. This time, the sound commenced earlier, near midnight's chime, that same hesitant or dragging scrape against the outer wall. Ilara sat bolt upright, every sinew taut, straining to decipher the noise through the architecture's skin. Ignore it, a voice reasoned. Sleep. Yet an undeniable certainty solidified within her. Something lingered just outside, pacing the boundary between her world and the wild. Compelled, she crept to the window once more. The yard remained empty, bathed in the same ethereal glow, but her gaze snagged on the tree line, that stark demarcation between manicured lawn and untamed forest. There, partially swallowed by the deeper penumbra, stood a form, indistinct, motionless. Ilara squinted, yearning for detail, but darkness held its secrets close. The figure simply was, oriented towards the house, an unnerving sentinel. Ice water trickled down her spine. She recoiled from the glass, heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her sternum. Fumbling through the kitchen drawers, she retrieved a heavy flashlight, its metallic coolness a small comfort. Returning to the window, she drew a shaky breath, thumbed the switch, and speared the woods with a beam of artificial daylight. Gone. The figure had vanished. Frantically, she swept the light across the tree line, pulse thrumming a panicked tattoo. Only empty darkness stared back. Imagination, she insisted, a desperate mantra against rising fear. Tricks of shadow and solitude. Switching off the light, she crawled back into bed, sleep a distant shore it took hours to reach. A fragile calm settled over the following days. Ilara clung to normalcy, rationalizing the apparition, a deer caught in moonlight, a peculiar confluence of shadows. The scraping? Wind, surely? Yet the sensation of being observed lingered, an invisible pressure against her skin. Then, a week hence, the quiet shattered anew. She was wide awake this time, curled in the living room armchair, lost in the pages of a novel near 11. The house was utterly still, precisely the peaceful state she craved. Without preamble, the scraping intruded, emanating from the side of the house. She froze, the book tumbling from her lap. The sound was different now, slower, more deliberate, a rhythmic dragging along the wood siding. Rising on trembling legs, Ilara approached the window, peering cautiously into the night. It was back. The figure stood sentinel at the forest's edge, an unwavering silhouette against the deeper black. A wave of viscid fear washed over her, her thoughts scattering like startled birds. Flee? Call for help? Confront it? An instinct, primal and insistent, screamed at her to remain within the fragile sanctuary of the walls, beyond its reach. She retreated, hand unsteady, snatching her phone from the table. Police? What tangible evidence could she offer? There's someone standing, watching. They'd dismiss her as hysterical, another city transplant unnerved by rural quiet. She opted to wait, extinguishing the lights, melting into the shadows at the rear of the house. She sat there, cocooned in darkness, listening. Eventually, the scraping ceased. Silence returned, heavy and expectant. Dawn arrived, pale and uncertain. Driven by a desperate need for validation, Ilara ventured outside. She circled the house, eyes meticulously scanning the dew-kissed ground beside the wall where the sound had originated. Nothing. Then, drawn towards the tree line, she saw it, pressed deep into the soft earth, solitary and stark, a footprint. It was too large to be hers, its dimensions unsettlingly elongated, the impression suggesting immense weight. It was an aberration, profoundly wrong. A chill, sharp and deep, pierced through her. Animal, she tried to tell herself, some large woodland creature. But the denial felt thin, brittle. Something was out there, something that had no place being there. That night became a ritual of fortification. Every lock bolted, every window sash secured, each checked and rechecked before she dared approach her bed. Sleep, however, remained a fortress unbreachable. Each creak of the aging house, every sigh of the wind, jolted her upright, heart seizing. Around 3 a.m, the sound returned, louder now, more insistent, originating from the back of the house. She lay paralyzed, listening, a captive audience to the unseen performance outside. The scraping grated not just against wood, but against her sanity. To look felt like surrender, an invitation. Yet inaction was its own form of torture. Grabbing the flashlight, its weight of familiar dread, she forced herself towards the back door. A deep inhalation, a bracing of will, and she flicked the switch, aiming the beam into the yard. It stood there, closer, much closer now, occupying the space halfway between the tree line and the house itself. Panic detonated within her, a blinding, paralyzing force. Tall, unnaturally slender, its form seemed to waver, composed more of shadow than substance, threatening to dissolve into the surrounding gloom. It remained utterly still, devoid of sound or discernible feature, simply watching. Ilara stumbled backward, fumbling with the deadbolt, the click echoing unnaturally loud in the sudden silence as she extinguished the light. She slid down the wall, collapsing onto the cool kitchen floor, back pressed hard against the wood, breath coming in ragged gasps. A trick of the light, her mind pleaded, a desperate, failing negotiation with terror. But a deeper, colder knowledge settled in her bones. It was real. Morning found her resolved. This house, this supposed sanctuary, had become a cage with an unseen warden. Swiftly, mechanically, she packed a single bag, the essentials only. A call to a friend, voice tight with feigned composure, secured a temporary refuge elsewhere. She left Stillwater Creek without a backward glance, the house shrinking in her rearview mirror. She told herself it was temporary, a respite to clear her head. But a part of her, the part that had stared into the absolute darkness of the woods and seen something stare back, knew it was final. The identity of the figure, its purpose, remained an agonizing enigma. Yet even now, in the perceived safety of distance, the image persists. A tall, thin shadow standing patiently at the edge of the trees, waiting. And Ilara knows with chilling certainty it is out there still, watching, waiting for her return. day's accumulated weight pressed into Elias as he collapsed onto the yielding expanse of his sofa, the city darkening beyond the glass. One small duty lingered, a quick voice memo for Julian. He coaxed the phone screen to life, tapped the record icon, and let his voice, frayed at the edges, populate the 20-second void, a brief explanation for a delay, a promise of details come morning. Around him, the apartment held a profound stillness. The air hung motionless, windows sealed. He was unequivocally alone. Just this fleeting digital utterance. Playback was routine, a check for clarity until the anomaly surfaced. Woven beneath the familiar cadence of his own weary tone, another sound existed, an ethereal susurrus, impossibly faint, its meaning dissolving into breath. Elias halted the playback, the phone's illuminated rectangle suddenly stark against the dim room. Street noise? Unlikely. He occupied the apartment's quiet heart, far from the windows which were shut fast. The television remained a dark, silent mirror. Only the ceiling fan on its lowest setting contributed a near inaudible, rhythmic hum. He pressed play again, attention narrowed, listening with an intensity that felt almost physical. His own voice emerged, tired but distinct. "Hey Julian, just checking in. I'll send the details tomorrow." And threaded through it, that delicate, sighing murmur, less a voice than the ghost of one. It wasn't interference, not the crackle of faulty electronics, but something organic, intimate, yet utterly indecipherable. A surprising warmth flooded Elias's face. He held his breath, replaying the segment. His words then faintly overlaying them, something akin to, was it male? Female? Too attenuated, so it's too spectral to tell. He nudged the volume upwards. His own voice amplified, but the whisper remained stubbornly distant, as though emanating from behind a thick, muffling curtain. He listened perhaps 5 times in succession. With each pass, a delicate chill feathered the back of his neck. The apartment remained stubbornly, unnervingly silent. His gaze swept the periphery, the unlit kitchen archway, the dim throat of the hallway. Vacant. An experiment formed. He initiated a new recording. No meaningful content, just a simple spoken testing, followed by several seconds of held silence before stopping. Playback delivered precisely that. Testing, then pure, unadulterated quiet. No whisper. He allowed a flicker of relief, perhaps fatigue playing tricks on his perception. Then, navigating back to the original message, he pressed play. It was still there, undiminished. He forwarded the audio file to Julian, appending a terse text. "Listen closely to this. Hear anything weird?" The wait for a reply stretched, feeling absurdly long. Elias felt a prickle of embarrassment. Pushing himself up, he activated the kitchen light, its sudden glare harsh. He paced, checking the window latches. Secure. His third-floor apartment overlooked a quiet, enclosed courtyard, currently deserted under the sodium lamps. No plausible source for external whispers. Still, his heart tapped an accelerated, nervous rhythm against his ribs. He poured a glass of water, leaning against the cool counter, trying to conjure logic. A sensitive microphone picking up stray frequencies, a speaker malfunction. Another test, new recording. This is a second test. I'm alone. I'm just testing my phone. A pause, then stop. Playback, flawless. His voice, solitary and clear. No parasitic sound. He returned to the sofa, placed the phone on the coffee table, and revisited the first recording. The whisper persisted, an unwelcome guest refusing to leave. He retrieved a pair of headphones from a drawer, inserting the jack, seeking a more intimate audience with the anomaly. Encased in the headphones, the whisper gained a subtle clarity, yet remained stubbornly unintelligible. Now he could discern soft, intermittent breaths woven into the sound, disturbingly proximate, like someone standing just out of sight, murmuring too low for comprehension. He spun around instinctively. Empty space met his eyes. The fine hairs on his forearms prickled upright. Up again, a more thorough inspection. Bedroom, bathroom, checked. Closet door pulled open, revealing only clothes and shadows. Nothing. No one. He lived alone. The solitude was absolute. He tried to dismiss it, seeking refuge in normalcy. In the kitchen, he mechanically assembled a sandwich. Hunger was absent, replaced by a need for grounding, routine action. He ate standing, eyes scanning the familiar territory of his quiet apartment. Everything seemed placid. The refrigerator emitted its low, constant thrum. The overhead light fixture buzzed faintly. Outside, only the distant sigh of traffic. No voices, no whispers. His phone buzzed on the counter. Julian? A text message popped up. Yeah, I hear something weird in the background. What the hell is that? A knot tightened in Elias's stomach. So it wasn't auditory hallucination. It was real enough for another to perceive. I don't know, he typed back, his fingers feeling slightly numb. I was alone. Julian's reply arrived as a voice message. Elias played it. Dude, Julian's voice said, steady but laced with unease. That's creepy. It sounds like someone is whispering. Are you sure no one was there? A compulsion seized Elias. Replicate the exact conditions. Back on the sofa, same position. He even silenced the ceiling fan, plunging the room into absolute quiet. He spoke the original phrase again. Hey, Julian, just checking in. I'll send the details tomorrow. He tried to match the initial tone, the weariness, and stop. Play. Nothing but his own voice, stark and alone. He tried a second time. Same result. A third repetition. Just his voice. He navigated back, inevitably, to the first recording. Play. The whisper endured, tenacious, seemingly fused to that specific digital moment. He attempted to manipulate the audio file on his phone, trying to isolate, to amplify the spectral sound. He replayed the critical section over and over, leaning close, straining until his temples throbbed with his pulse. It remained just beyond grasp, a soft, sibilant hissing, shh, undeniably speech-like in its rhythm, yet refusing to yield a single coherent word. He felt a drop of sweat trace a cold path down his back, his shirt clinging damply. His breathing had quickened, become shallow. He crossed to the front door, pressed his eye to the peephole. The outside hallway stretched silent and empty, bathed in the weak, ambient light. No sounds disturbed the stillness. He drew back the deadbolt, opened the door a crack, then wider, stepping out onto the landing. Nothing. Just the profound quiet of the building at night. He retreated inside, the heavy click of the lock echoing unnervingly. He made one last circuit of the apartment, checking each room again, a growing sense of dread his only companion. He ended up standing in the middle of the bedroom, the phone feeling heavy and potent in his hand. He looked at it, then at the silent room around him. He raised it slowly, his thumb hovering over the record button, the silence thick with unanswered questions. Midnight stillness shattered. A single, resonant clang jolted Elias from sleep, sharp and ancient, the toll of some forgotten country steeple echoing impossibly within his walls. It struck not just the air, but him, a physical blow that cinched his chest, sending his heart into a frantic, panicked rhythm. He lay rigid, staring into the oppressive dark above, listening as the chime reverberated, fading slowly against the plaster. His head felt thick with groggy disbelief, yet he forced himself upright. Was this some fragment of a nightmare clinging to wakefulness? Rubbing his eyes changed nothing. The ringing persisted, not continuously, but in a strange, halting cadence. A pregnant pause, then another cascade of chimes pulsed through the quiet house. He swung bare legs onto the cool floorboards, silence amplifying the thrum beneath his ribs. The house stood empty around him, no guest, no reason for visitation. Yet the sound persisted. His phone's beams sliced the oppressive dark, illuminating familiar shapes. Dresser, closet, lamp, static and inert. Nothing capable of such brazen sound. Down the compact hallway he crept, a hunter tracking an auditory phantom. Each careful footfall punctuated the bell's odd rhythm. Silence, then a cluster of chimes. It seemed to emanate from the living room. He turned, light dancing ahead on plaster. Coffee table, television, bookshelves laden with silent stories, the ghosts of last night's empty bottles. Nothing metallic, nothing suspended, no bell. Then the chime retreated, fainter now, whispering from the kitchen's maw. He paused, breath catching, slick sweat prickling his nape despite the room's cool air. Through the doorway, his light swept over countertops cluttered with dinner's aftermath, the quiet hum of the refrigerator a stark contrast. The faucet stood sentinel, shut tight, and then, impossibly, the bell tolled again, seeming to rebound from the very bedroom he'd just vacated. A trick of acoustics? The echo played games in the confined space, leading him back, flashlight probing corners, chasing a sound that dissolved upon approach. A quarter hour bled away in this fruitless pursuit. Frustration clawed at him, mouth parched, breath coming in shallow gasps as if he'd run miles. His stomach twisted into a cold knot. Perhaps the source lay outside, on the street, a neighbor's bizarre installation. But before the thought could solidify into action, the ringing ceased, utterly. Silence rushed back in, thick and absolute, broken only by the frantic tattoo of his own pulse against his temples. He stood frozen in the hallway, catching his breath. A wave of relief washed over him, fragile and incomplete, his muscles still coiled tight. One last check of the bedroom seemed prudent. He pushed the door inward, sweeping the flashlight's beam across the familiar walls, and stopped there. Adorning the plaster were shapes that hadn't existed moments before, large, circular impressions, stained a mottled, angry orange-brown, like rust blooms or the residue of ancient, corroded metal. He blinked, mind struggling to reconcile memory with reality. They were undeniably new. Hesitantly, he approached, touching a finger to one disc. A fine, flaky powder came away, staining his skin the color of decay. His gaze shot upward. More circles marred the ceiling, scattered randomly, as though something vast and round had pressed against the surfaces. A shiver traced its way up his spine, raising gooseflesh despite the lack of a breeze. His stomach lurched again. These weren't water stains, not mold. They looked applied, deliberate, branded onto his home. His eyes darted wildly, seeking an explanation, finding only the mundane unchanged. The bed rumpled as he'd left it, the closet shut fast, windows secured. But these unsettling circles pulsed in the flashlight's glare, imbued with a silent, unnerving intent. The phantom bell still echoed in his mind. He forced slow, measured breaths, trying to regain composure. A glance at his phone, just past 3 in the morning. Sleep, when it finally came, was shallow and plagued by fleeting images of tarnished metal. He kept startling awake, his gaze drawn magnetically to the walls, where the circles seemed to throb faintly in the dark. Morning light, filtered through the blinds, found Elias instantly checking the walls. The circles remained, though sunlight seemed to diminish their intensity, rendering them almost faded. He touched one. No residue came off this time. The day passed in a haze of distraction. Breakfast went untasted. The television provided ignored background chatter, his thoughts circling endlessly back to the bell's resonant cry. By noon, a sense of foolishness crept in. There was no bell here. He owned nothing remotely capable of producing such a sound. A waking dream, perhaps? But the circles were stubbornly real. A cursory search revealed fainter, smaller iterations of the same shape on the hallway walls. Closets yielded nothing, nor did peering under furniture or into the dusty crawl space of the attic. Sleep offered no sanctuary that following night. Elias courted distraction with the television's flickering light until midnight bled towards the witching hour. Exhaustion finally tugged at his eyelids. He killed the living room lights, the sudden darkness amplifying his unease, and walked towards the bedroom. The instant his foot crossed the threshold, it returned, a single percussive ring that shot ice through his veins. He froze, heart hammering against his ribs. Silence stretched taut, then snapped with another chime, this one echoing from the hallway he'd just traversed. He retreated, fumbling for the hall light switch. The bulb flickered, then flared, casting stark illumination on a horrifying proliferation. More circles. They peppered the walls, larger now, the rusted hue deeper, almost wet-looking, obscenely fresh. He reached out, palm flat against one. The texture was abrasive, gritty. Pulling his hand back, he saw the telltale ochre flakes clinging to his skin. His breath hitched. Wiping his hand numbly on his trousers, he heard the bell again. A sharp doublet, this time from the living room. He forced himself forward, past the spreading constellations of decay. In the living room, the overhead light revealed the contagion's spread. The ceiling was afflicted, circles clustered near the windows. One even adhered brazenly to the exterior of a kitchen cabinet. Each shared the same approximate size, the circumference of a small basin, and that same disturbing corrosive patina. The bell fell silent once more. Hours unraveled as Elias paced the confines of his small house, a prisoner listening for his tormentor. The chimes came sporadically, near, distant, singular, clustered, each peal accompanied by a visceral plunge of cold within his chest, a prickling awareness at the base of his skull. An attempt to reach a friend met only the sterile drone of voicemail. The idea of fleeing warred with the fear of finding the phenomenon waiting outside. Sleep eventually ambushed him on the living room sofa sometime near dawn, a ragged, uneasy surrender. The circles glared back when he woke, stiff-necked and groggy. Daylight did little to dispel the unease. He moved through the motions, dressing, attempting breakfast, heading to a job where focus proved elusive. His mind endlessly replayed the nocturnal intrusions, seeking logic where none offered itself. A concerned query from his supervisor about his pallor was met with a mumbled excuse about fatigue. He began to linger elsewhere after work, anonymous diners, late-night bookstores, anywhere but home. Yet return was inevitable. Each evening, the turn of the key in the lock was an act of bracing, a tightening in his chest, anticipating the violation. He'd flood the rooms with light, a futile gesture against the encroaching strangeness. One evening, reaching for water in the kitchen, a solitary chime sounded from the corner by the bin. Not loud, but sharp enough to make him recoil, the glass slipping from his grasp to explode on the linoleum. Water pooled around the glittering shards. Heart pounding a frantic rhythm, he stared at the empty corner, then mechanically cleaned the mess, hands trembling, careful not to venture too close to the source of the sound. Nights were spent huddled in the living room's artificial glow, the television a low murmur against the silence. The bell punctuated the hours with chilling irregularity, and the circles continued their silent bloom, appearing on the sofa's upholstery like leprous spots, creeping along baseboards, framing doorways. Touching one on the couch revealed a rough, almost scored texture, as if coarse metal had abraded the fabric. He decided documentation was necessary. His phone captured images of the spreading stains. Audio notes logged the times of the ringing, but the sound itself remained elusive on recordings, a mere ghost of its true, chilling resonance. Another attempt to enlist a friend for moral support yielded only polite regrets. He hadn't dared mention the bell. The bell's unpredictable rhythm, sometimes 20 minutes apart, sometimes an hour of silence, sometimes rapid-fire chimes, eroded his nerves, leaving him drained and perpetually on edge. Around 3 one morning, he found himself standing transfixed in the hallway, glaring at the rust-colored discs lining the walls like malignant eyes. They climbed towards the ceiling, vanishing near the cornices. He pressed his ear to the cool plaster, hearing only the faint thrum of pipes or wiring. A desperate whisper escaped him, pleading for release into the unresponsive air. The following days blurred into a pattern of nocturnal dread and daytime exhaustion. A faint, persistent metallic tang now hung in the air, vaguely nauseating. He bought harsh cleaning agents, scrubbing furiously at the marks. They'd fade slightly, offering a moment's false hope, only to reappear hours later, their rusty intensity seemingly renewed. His home became a place of dread. He wandered the city, sat in his car staring at nothing, walked aimless miles, merely delaying the inevitable return, the key turning, the held breath, the waiting. Tonight finds Elias in his bedroom fortress, lamplight carving a small haven amidst the encroaching marks. He writes these words, a flimsy shield against the silence, against the waiting. The circles are everywhere now, walls, ceiling, floor, a tapestry of decay. His heart maintains its frantic tempo, muscles ache with unrelieved tension. He keeps glancing at the door, anticipating the sound that lives just beyond it. His phone lies nearby, a useless talisman. Who could he call? Who would believe? Periodically, compelled by an unseen force, he rises, stands motionless in the room's center, legs trembling, palms slick with cold sweat, swallowing against the lump constricting his throat. The memory of that first night, the bewildering chase, the shock of discovery, remains vivid, a constant echo beneath the surface. Just now, a muffled resonance drifted from the living room. He has to go. He must look. Inaction breeds phantoms in the periphery, a terror worse than confrontation. How much longer can this siege continue? The rust-hued discs burn behind his eyelids when he dares to close them. Whenever solitude descends, the ancient bell inevitably rings. He rises now, phone clutched tight, recording app open. Proof. He needs proof, if only for his own fractured certainty. Or perhaps the blank recording will simply underscore his isolation, trapped with this auditory haunting. A fleeting, terrifying image flashes, turning to see the bell itself, ancient and corroded, hanging impossibly in the air. He pushes the thought away, the constriction in his chest unbearable. He moves into the hallway, his own footsteps unnaturally loud in the expectant hush. No chime yet, but the air feels charged, vibrating with potential. The circles on the walls gleam under the light, their orange edges seeming almost luminous, obscenely vital. He steps forward into the living room threshold, phone raised, and waits. A part of him prays for silence, for release. But another part, colder and more certain, knows the bell will ring. It always does. And he will be here, waiting, utterly alone, companioned only by the reverberations of that rusted, unseen toll.